We have been discussing the assertion that Sikhi, as it is practiced today, is no longer the Sikhi that was gifted to us by our gurus. Ours is a spirituality that stands distorted, corrupted and tainted. Our scripture, Gurbani, has been distorted through Vedic and Puranic slants in interpretations and translations. Our history has been muddled in unbelievable tales of miracles called Sakhis. The general conduct of Sikhi has come to be dictated by a clergy class, and our religious practices consist primarily of those smuggled in from rejected and discarded rituals of the pre-1469 faiths. In short, Sikhi today stands as a faith that has been hijacked from its unique path and equally distinct goals. Three powerful groups, all of which were fake, deviant, and or anti-Sikhi, conducted this hijacking, by which is meant the distorting, corrupting, and contaminating of Guru Nanak's divine spirituality. These three groups did so by controlling our institutions, our literature, our historical narratives, and our Gurdwaras, and by extension, the fate and psyche of Sikhi for a long period of 207 years from 1718 till 1925. The first group is the Udasis, the followers of the disowned son of Guru Nanak, Sri Chand. The Udasis had exclusive control of Sikh Gurdwaras for the first 60 years beginning 1718. The second group, a more powerful, more deviant and a more capable group, namely the Nirmlas, would take over from the Udasis after these initial 60 years. How the Nirmalas hijacked Sikhi from its unique philosophy, from its original goals and from its divine intent is the subject of today's video. The Nirmalas descended into Sikh Gurdwaras and institutions from Banaras beginning 1765, bolstered by the following 6 factors. First, there remained a vacuum pertaining to control of our institutions, given that genuine Sikhs were still very much in the wilderness fighting for their survival. Second, the Udasis had, for some 60 years, proven that deviant and anti-Sikh groups could succeed in running and controlling Gurdwaras and the Sikh psyche with impunity, thus providing the Nirmalas with a working model for the hijacking. Third, there still was an abundance of Gurdwaras that were not occupied by the Udasis, that were available for occupation by the Nirmalas, allowing them to creep in and take control. Fourth, in their 6 decades of occupation of Gurdwaras and our institutions, the Udasis had distorted, corrupted and tainted Sikhi, making it easier for other deviant groups to infiltrate with impunity. Sikhi had been amply distorted by the Udasis for almost 3 generations, to the extent that Sikhs were willing to accept Nirmala control with open arms even. Fifth, the Nirmalas, given their Banaras education, origin and backing, were inherently superior in intellect, capacity, numbers, as well as spiritual powers, albeit Vedic, to act actually replaced the Udasis as the primary occupants and controllers of our Gurdwaras and institutions. Sixth, the Banaras-based Nirmalas were intimately connected to Brahmanism, the enemy of Sikhi from the day Guru Nanak rejected the domination of the Brahmin clergy. The Brahmin clergy was intolerant of any belief system that critiqued their centuries-old established order. In line with such intolerance, the Brahmin clergy worked effectively and actively to ensure the destruction or at least the non-proliferation of that belief system that went against them. The Nirmalas, given their intimate link with Brahmanism, thus had a much deeper passion and a greater drive to corrupt and dominate Sikhi than the Udasis ever had. In other words, Pyareo, the Nirmalas, primarily by virtue of their Banaras education, Banaras experience and Banaras backing, as well as their Brahman roots, were better equipped to distort and corrupt Sikhi with vehemence. They had a better understanding of how to achieve their goals effectively. For instance, the Nirmalas realized that one of the reasons why the Udasis were unable to fully and completely infiltrate Sikhi and become fully acceptable to Sikhs was their Udasi dress. The Nirmalas thus descended as the hijackers of Sikhi, dressed in full Sikhi garb, albeit in Banarasi colors. The damage the Nirmalas did to Sikhi will go way beyond that done by the Udasis. This is because they infiltrated the inner sanctums of the Sikh psyche. They infiltrated our philosophy, our literature, our historical narratives, and Gurbani interpretation and translation, all areas which the Udasis had never stepped foot into. Another way of saying this is that while the Udasis were content with hijacking the periphery of Sikhi, the Nirmalas hijacked both the periphery and the core. In short, the Nirmalas would make for a superior breed of hijackers of Sikh spirituality. The reason why they called themselves Nirmalate was to fool the Sikhs into believing that they were indeed the pure Sikhs and that the rest of the Sikhs were unnirmal or non-nirmal, meaning incomplete, impure, or of a lower order. Actually, Pyareo, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji uses the word nirmal within three distinct contexts. The first is to refer to the Creator, as is the case in this verse on page 426 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Harjiyo nirmal nirmala, nirmal manvasa, Gurmati salahiya, Bekhya mahe udasa rahav. Meaning, the uniquely unblemished Creator resided within Creator-realized minds. So the word Nirmal here refers to the Creator. Nirmal was further used to refer to Shabad and Gurbani. This usage can be seen in this verse on page 121 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Nirmal Shabad, Nirmal hai Bani, Nirmal Jot, Sab Mahe Samani. Meaning, the messages of the Shabad within Bani were uniquely unblemished and resided within the unblemished mind and conscience. Finally, the word Nirmal was used to denote inner purity brought about by the inculcation of divine virtues. This verse, also from page 121 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, exemplifies Nirmal Naam Vasya Man Aaye Man Tan Nirmal Maya Moho Gavaye, meaning the unblemished divine virtues have come to reside within my mind, bringing inner purity and eliminating the blemish of temporal attachment. So, nowhere in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji is the word Nirmal or Nirmale used to denote or refer to a group or a class of people. In essence, then, the notion of the Nirmalas as a privileged group is based on a concocted claim that is never supported by Gurbani. But that did not stop the Nirmalas from establishing their fake legitimacy through what I call the big Nirmala bluff. The Nirmalas concocted a historical come philosophical falsehood to establish their legitimacy among Sikhs. They created a fake narrative that Guru Gobind Singh selected 5 Sikhs to become and remain celibate. He then ordered them to go to Kashi, which is Banaras now, to study Sanskrit and to learn the spirituality of the Vedas. Nirmala writer Gyani Gyan Singh writes in his book Pant Prakash that Guru Gobind Singh picked Ram Singh, Karm Singh, Ganda Singh, Veer Singh and Sobha Singh to go to Kashi on account of their exemplary behavior in the company of the 10th Guru. The writer of Pant Prakash claimed that all 5 of them always wore white, always remained calm, and lived a celibate life and undertook excessive meditation. Guru Gobind Singh is said to have been utterly impressed and hence given permission to all 5 to discard their Sikhi dress and go to Kashi disguised as Brahmins. This story is of course patently fake, and it is fake on the following 7 counts. First, in addition to being proficient in Brej and Farsi, Guru Gobind Singh Parcha was a Sanskrit scholar himself in the tradition of Guru Nanak and Guru Arjun Ji. The Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Pyareo contains compositions and entire banis of Guru Nanak and Guru Arjun Ji in Sanskrit as well as its precursor language Prakrit. For instance, the banis titled Slok Sahis-Kirti Mahalla Pehla and Mahalla Panjma that are found from pages 1353 to 1361 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Sikhs were thus already exposed to Sanskrit in the spiritual context. It is therefore inconceivable that Guru Gobind Singh would need to send Sikhs to Banaras to study Sanskrit. Second, Guru Gobind Singh Ji had proficient Sanskrit scholars in his Darbar. Kirpa Ram Dutt was a top-notch Sanskrit scholar in the employment of Guruji. He was tasked with teaching Sanskrit to Sikhs. Sikhs in Punjab were well versed in Sanskrit. Cheju Chevar in Pajokhada village, for example, was a Sanskrit scholar. Now, for someone considered to be a low-caste Chevar, to become a Sanskrit scholar meant that a sufficiently large pool of Sikhs across all Sikh sections of society had a working knowledge of Sanskrit. It is thus improbable that any of our gurus had to send Sikhs to Banaras to study a language. Third, Guru Gobind Singh's so-called decision to have 5 Sikhs go to Kashi disguised as Brahmins suggests deceit and trickery. What was the 10th Guru afraid of? That without the disguise, the Brahmins in Kashi would discover the truth and thus embarrassed Guru on grounds that he had to send his Sikhs to Kashi to get educated? or that Guru Gobind Singh did not want the Brahmins there to know that the Guru himself was incapable of educating his own Sikhs, or that the 10th Guru wanted the 5 Sikhs to steal what the Brahmins in Kanchi had without the Brahmins knowing about it? What was it that the Kanchi Brahmins had that the Guru could not give to his Sikhs? The mere suggestion of sending Sikhs under disguise is ridiculous to say the least. It is beneath the character of a Guru, any Guru for that matter. Fourth, Guru Nanak went to Kashi in person to critique the Brahmins there of their ritualistic ways. Sikh preachers such as Baba Buddha Ji and Bhai Gurdas Ji went far and wide to preach Sikhi. Guru Amar Das Padsha set up the Manji system, where 22 Sikh Pracharaks preached Gurbat to the masses. None had to rely on the Brahmin clergy to be educated in spiritual preaching methods. Why then would Guru Gobind Singh suddenly decide to send his Sikhs to Banaras to study the Vedas as claimed by the Nirmala writer? Fifth, 9 Gurus preceding Guru Gobind Singh Padsha never considered it even remotely necessary for their Sikhs to study the spirituality of the Vedas. Why did the 10th Guru now decide that Sikhs needed to be educated in the contents of the Vedas at Banaras and then send them there under cover of disguise? Sixth, Grist or family life as a householder is a core principle of Sikhi. It is a foundational principle. All our Gurus, with the single exception of the 8-year-old Guru Harkrishan Ji, were all Gristis, all married with families and households. Gurbani, as contained within the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, severely critiques and rebukes celibacy. It is therefore unthinkable that Guru Gobind Singh Ji would handpick 5 Sikhs on account that they were non-Gristis, that they were celibate. It does not make any sense for the Guru to be considering celibacy a virtue to begin with, given that celibacy went against the tenets of Gurbani, given its critique position in Sikhi, and given the Guru's own family life as a Gristi householder. Seventh, the story further contravenes the dictates of Gurbani on 3 counts. 1 with regard to Kanchi, 2 with regard to studying the spirituality of the Vedas, and 3 with regard to the Bipar clergy. The following verses from Gurbani, as contained on page 491 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, make this point clear. Gujari Mahalla Teacher, Na Kansi Mat Upjaye, Na Kansi Mat Jaye. Sadgur Milya Mat Upjaye, Tae Soji Paye. Meaning, enlightenment is neither gained nor lost in Kansi. I obtained such understanding from the Creator connecting Guru Shabd. The practical injunction of this verse is straightforward. Going to Kanchi or otherwise is of zero consequence to one's enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a function of one's location. It is a state of mind that emanates from within the messages of the Shabad. The context of this verse is critical. The Brahmanical texts had mentioned that the Ganges and Kanchi, Banaras, were special on account of both having descended directly from heaven. The descriptive name for Kanchi or Banaras was thus Shivapuri, the abode or the residence of Shiva. Kabir critiques this fake claim, as well as another equally fake claim that whomsoever died in Kanchi went straight into heaven, while anyone breathing his last in another town called Maghar would reincarnate as a donkey. Kabir's verses are contained on page 326 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji as follows. Ab kaho Ram kavan gat mori, taji le Banaras mat pai thori rahav. Sagal janam Shiv puri gavaya, marti bar maghar उठ आया. बहुत बरस तप किया कांसी, मरण पया मगहर की बासी. कांशी मगहर सम बिचारी, ओछी भगत कैसे उतरस पारी. Meaning, I have discarded Banaras. I spent my entire life in Shivpuri. But now that death nears, I have come to reside in Maghar. Kanshi and Maghar are both the same. Even if they say spirituality in Maghar is defective, Bhagta Kabir's final verse is as definitive as it can ever get. Kaho gur gaj shiv sab te jane, Bua Kabir ramat Sri Ram. Meaning, they all say Shiva is the provider of salvation after death. I have no need for such, as I am already imbued in my Creator. Kabir relegates Kanshi to the level of Maghar again on page 969 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Jaisa Maghar, taisi Kansi, hum ek keh kar jani. Meaning, I consider Maghar and Kanshi to be on par. It is worth noting that Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji soundly rejects the spiritual leadership of the Brahmin as illustrated by Kabir in his verse on page 1377. Kabir Brahman Guru hai Jagat ka, Bhagtan ka gur na hai. Arj urj ke pachmua, charo Vedain mahe. Meaning, Kabir, because the Brahmin has suffered spiritual death upon being engulfed in the four Vedas, he may claim to be the Guru of the world, but never of the Bhagats. Given the clear, unmistakable and explicit rejection of Kansi, the rejection of the Brahmin clergy leadership, and the rejection of the Vedas within Gurbani, it is simply impossible to conceive that Guru Gobind Singh would have handpicked 5 of his best Sikhs and sent them to Kashi to study the Vedas under the tutelage of the Brahmin. It is patently clear that the story is concocted to provide a fake Guru-ordained stamp of approval to the Nirmala way of life, celibacy included. The fake story is further aimed at according legitimacy to the Nirmala group amongst authentic Sikhs. Such legitimacy would allow the Nirmalas to conduct the hijacking in broad daylight. It is even more likely that Nirmala Gyani Gyan Singh is attempting to denigrate the character of Guru Gobind Singh. As a Kanshi trained Nirmala himself, Gyani Gyan Singh was acutely aware that the Brahmanical literature contained narratives of contempt and ridicule for anyone who obtained their education, their skills, or their knowledge through theft, through deceit, through deception, or through disguise. The Mahabharata, for instance, contains the story of one Ekalavya who picked up archery from his guru Dronacharya without the guru's permission. Ekalavya's right thumb was amputated as punishment, thus preventing him from wielding the weapon forever. In another mythological story, Karan, who was the son of Kunti, disguised himself to become a pupil of Parsuram, a student of Parsuram. When discovered, Parsuram cursed Karan to suffer death from the same knowledge that he had learnt by deceit. And Pyareo, the tale actually goes on to say that Karan suffered such death. Such tales establish the Brahmin hatred for knowledge acquired through deceptive means. Was Nirmala Gyan Singh thus trying to impose such ridicule on Guru Gobind Singh Pacha by concocting his tale of sending 5 Sikhs in disguise to study the Vedas and Sanskrit in Banaras? So what is the truth then regarding the origin of the Nirmalas in Punjab and within the parameters of Sikhi? History tells us that the first group of Nirmalas came from Banaras to Punjab around 1765, a full 57 years after the demise of the 10th Guru. Meaning to say, Guru Gobind Singh had nothing to do with their existence. They came to Punjab in the aftermath of the destruction of Darbar Sahib by Ahmad Shah Durrani, which happened in April of 1762. Durrani had reduced Darbar Sahib to rubble and filled the Sarovar with debris. In 1763, 1 year after the destruction, the genuine Sikhs had a Sarbat Khalsa in the jungles and took a decision to rebuild or reconstruct the Darbar Sahib. This was expected to be a challenging process, given the fact that authentic Sikhs did not have the freedom of movement. In any case, the decision to rebuild was conveyed far and wide, and news of rebuilding of Darbar Sahib reached Banaras. It was a perfect opportunity for the Nirmalas, who were centered in Banaras then, to travel to Punjab for the purpose of taking over the reconstructed Darbar Sahib. The Nirmalas were led by an individual who took the name of Surat Singh. He completed the Nirmala takeover of Darbar Sahib by 1780, by which time the Darbar Sahib had become the center of Nirmala thought. For all intents and purposes, the Darbar Sahib became the Nirmala headquarters. It was renamed Hari Mandir and would act as the epicenter of the hijacking of Sikhi for decades to come. The justification for renaming Darbar Sahib to Harmandir is contained within Nirmala composed text named Gurdwaras Padshai Shaving. The gist of the fake narrative within Gurdwaras is that Vishnu and his consort had come in the form of a disguise as Sikhs to help Guru Arjun in the construction of Darbar Sahib. Upon completion, both Vishnu and his consort had revealed their true identities to the fifth Guru, who, in recognition of their services, agreed to rename the place Hari Mandir, meaning Vishnu's temple. Now, Nirmala Surat Singh was a Vedic intellectual who was a prolific writer, an equally prolific poet, and a kathakar of the Vedas, Upanishads, and other Sanatan texts. So, while in Punjab and having infiltrated the Sikh Gurdwaras, he started traveling and doing katha of Gurbani in full and complete Vedic slant. His son, Nirmala Sant Singh, born and educated in Punjab, would get appointed as Granthi of Darbar Sahib. And he remained Granthi throughout the period of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, which was from 1799 all the way to 1839. Nirmala Sant Singh's son, Nirmala Gurmukh Singh, became leader of Akal Bunga, which was subsequently renamed Akal Takht. He also became an influential figure in the politics of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now, what this meant was that the Nirmalas had succeeded in taking over and occupying the highest seat of Sikh authority within 70 years of the culmination of the Guru period in 1708. Nirmala Gurmukh Singh's son, Nirmala Ripdaman Singh, would become Granthi of Darbar Sahib and head of Akal Bunga. Granthi Nirmala Sant Singh had a chela, Nirmala Darbara Singh, who too would be appointed a Granthi at Darbar Sahib. So for all intents and purposes again, the Nirmalas exercised direct control of Darbar Sahib for 140 years from 1780 till 1920. This period translates into almost 6 generations. This also means that they controlled the Maryada at Darbar Sahib and most other major Gurdwaras for 1 century and a half. During this period, the Nirmalas, by virtue of their superiority in terms of their intellect, their resources, their passion and intent, succeeded in easing out the Udasis from virtually all major Sikh Gurdwaras. In their 6 generations of control over Sikhi, the primary contribution of the Nirmalas was towards corrupting the Sikh psyche and reverting Sikhi to Vedantic slants. As stated above, the Nirmalas, primarily by virtue of their Banaras education, Banaras experience, and Banaras backing, were better equipped to distort and corrupt Sikhi. They did this by infiltrating into the inner sanctums of the Sikh psyche, our philosophy, our history, our literature, and Gurbani interpretations and translations. Virtually all the deeply distorted and corrupted texts that the Nirmalas wrote during the 140 years they were in control of Sikhi are today presented to the Sikh world as classical Sikh texts or Puratan Sarods or Puratan Itihas by our Sikh clergy and our institutions under Nirmala control. This is akin to the Sikhs adopting as mainstream Sikhi the distortions that were cunningly created and inserted into the Sikh psyche by the Nirmalas. It is also akin to Sikhs accepting the hijacked version of Sikhi as true and authentic Sikhi. The nature and the subject matter of these so-called Puratan Sarods written by the Nirmalas is worth mentioning. These texts are steeped in Brahmanical mythology, in supernatural deeds, in strange and unbelievable phenomena, in mystical narratives, in paranormal chronicles, magical deeds, and miraculous powers. Unbelievable stuff wholly and completely rejected by Gurbani, but stuff that has come to be accepted and even preferred and liked by the Sikh masses, who, as a result of substantial efforts of the hijacking of their spirituality, have fallen prey to the Nirmala conspiracy. The next video, Pyareo, part 5 of 12, will examine the damage done to authentic Sikhi by Nirmalas through the wide-ranging, deep, and extensive corruption of Sikh literature. Please continue to join me in this journey of discovery pertaining to the hijacking of Sikhi.